This week, Seattle, Washington-based anarchists published an all call, and they want to plan another blockade of economic infrastructure like ports and railways starting in July. They're doing this, they say, in solidarity with Palestine. And according to this missive, plans are underway to block at least Seattle area ports starting Monday, July 1st, 2024, for the week of Independence Day. The post calls for anarchists, pro-Palestinian activists, and others to join in and also plan similar blockades across the country. These things happen from time to time. There's an all call that gets published, and this all call relies on autonomous action. Autonomous action is when someone says, hey, we're going to go do this, and they almost always put this out online. And in addition, they may have flyer campaigns and other types of print media. And then individuals, affinity groups, whoever wants to show up, shows up, and then they go do this thing, and it's autonomous action. Autonomous meaning there is no command and control. It's just kind of like a big blind transmission broadcast. You send it out, and then whoever shows up is who you're working with. And so this is an initial all call for nationwide action. We saw similar posts in 2020 when this choke points in a fragile network strategy was first circulated. And that's what you're looking at now. The choke points in a fragile network is part of a pamphlet that was circulated. And it is all about how much power activists have to shut down these economic choke points. And when we looked at projects like Shut Down DC and this choke points in a fragile network, the overall trend was pretty clear. If Trump had stayed in office, whether he was legitimately or illegitimately reelected, or however he stayed in office, if he was there on January 21st or 22nd, I guess in 2021, these far left groups were going to shut down the country, shut down the economy. And they would do this to put economic pressure on Trump's political allies, on supporters of Trump. And basically they were saying, we will shut down the economy until Trump leaves. And then when Trump leaves, we'll go back and we'll get the economy back started again, as if it's something you can just flip a switch on and off for your political preferences. And so when A15 came out and they started talking about blockading economically critical infrastructure, this is the first thing, immediately, the first thing I said, we have seen this before. This is the 2020 era choke points in a fragile network. And so apparently there are efforts to restart this for July. Speaking of A15, or the April 15th Day of Action, activists blocked traffic on bridges, highways, airport entrances, and other economically critical infrastructure across the world, across the United States. A15 Day of Action was also a global event. On April 15th in Seattle specifically, in the Seattle-Tacoma Olympia area, activists blocked the entrance to the Seattle-Tacoma airport. They also blocked the entrance, or both entrances eventually, to the port of Olympia. And so in July, I think we could see something very similar, something that's relatively temporary. I think most of these things lasted for hours, sometimes less, and relatively low level. There were only, I think, about 25 people who showed up to block the port of Olympia, but they did it in two small groups. And this is something that police could have cleared out, I think, very, very swiftly if there was the political will. I guess the political will is going to vary from city to city. So I think law enforcement reaction is obviously going to be a huge factor in how successful these potential Independence Day economic blockades are, if they even happen. I have seen a handful of similar efforts where they put out an all call, they try to build up this big protest, and it just fizzles out because no one shows up. However, we may see something worse than the A15 Day of Action. Because if the Israelis are in Rafah, or they have inflamed the situation, then we could see more protesters and activists and militants show up for this July 4th, especially if the Israelis are clearing Rafah around then. Another reason we may see something worse is because numerous A15 activists said their blockades could have been better if they had more material, if they had stacks of wooden pallets, or if they had furniture, or I don't know, stacks of bricks. If nails were also brought up, nails to puncture truck tires and vehicle tires. And so it's too early right now to predict. This all call just went out. It's too early to predict how successful or widespread these efforts are going to be. Typically, with this much early warning, cities are able to bolster a police presence, especially around critical infrastructure. Guarding roadways is obviously not something that's really going to happen. So I think blocking roadways, A, it's a common TTP. B, it's very easy. Plus, with these vehicle-based blockades, where you can do rolling blockades, all you really need is, you need 3 or 4 vehicles to just get in line going down an interstate, and then they slow, and then eventually, you park sideways, and you've caused this massive interstate blockage. And so I think that's probably the most likely course of action if this does happen. Most dangerous being a lot more material, a lot more destructive devices, potentially incendiary devices. I saw where some Stop Cop City militants, anarchist militants, just posted about how to basically create an at-home incendiary device. They put that up on their blog this week. I think a police response to this could be more efficient, because earlier this week I did talk about the counterinsurgency tactics that are already being applied. It does not look like to me that police chiefs are going to stand by and give these people room to riot. I don't think city leaders are going to stand by and give these people, quote unquote, room to riot. However, the 4th of July falls on a Thursday, and I think a great many police officers will want to take some vacation days around that time to celebrate Independence Day. And so if nothing else, this is an opportunity for the far left to force law enforcement agencies to cancel those vacation days to ensure maximum staffing. If you'll remember, a lot of police vacation days were canceled in the summer of 2020 because those police chiefs needed to fill their manning rosters for all summer. Typically, like in July 2020, in the summer of 2020, we saw law enforcement agencies basically going in 12-hour shifts all summer long. Basically no vacation days either. I don't think any vacation days for most of the big cities. And so this is something that is going to be a major irritant for law enforcement. And that in and of itself, I think, could also be a win for far left groups. So this is something that was just put out recently, and I will continue to monitor and report on these developments.